Hello there, and welcome to Roll on the Adventure, the show where usually we create role-playing games, play them, and then do a post-mortem. However, we're currently getting ready to do our next act, so we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm joined by Chris and Dimitiris.
Hello.
And we're going to be going through some of the RPG a day questions, which is a Twitter thing, and I don't know Twitter. Dimitiris, do you know anything more about this?
So this is apparently, I'm not huge into it either, but this is apparently a tradition that's been going on for quite a few years. I think it started in 2014. And yeah, it's basically a set of questions for every single day of August. So people talk about the favorite things about RPGs and answer all these sort of personal RPG questions. And there's a hashtag associated with this, which is hashtag RPGA Day 2018. So, yep, that's my knowledge about it.
Great. So we're going to be going through the first few of the questions and having a chat about them. So, let's cue the intro. Roll on
the adventure, roll on the adventure, roll on the adventure, roll on the adventure.
That'll do. Right then. Shall we just go straight in?
Yeah, I think I need to say that I've been posting answers to these questions consistently for the last 8 days.
Okay.
At this moment we're recording, so I've been doing most, but I'd really love to chat about these.
Cool. Yeah, I've been camping. I went to Tokonatsu, which is a sort of geeky festival thing in tents and doing anime-related things. So that's kind of off the grid as far as this stuff goes. I keep meaning to do this every year because I've got a few friends that do it, and I always forget every single time.
I think that digital isolation is good, isolated from devices and notifications, all that stuff. Like in these busy weeks, it's good to have a break every now and then.
It was kind of nice for 2 days. I kind of wouldn't want to do it for too long. I got back and it's like, now you've got 100 notifications. I've got 2 boxes full of like 70 emails. Yeah, most of which is like just marketing stuff, but a few things that I needed to action. It's like, oh no, all the stuff. Anyway, yeah, so the first one is, what do you love about RPGs? Chris, do you want to start?
So the main things I like about RPGs are kind of the stories you end up telling. So you could obviously just sit around and make things up because it gives you that framework to work in, and you've got some elements to work with in kind of a known area to start in.
Yeah, sort of like going from scratch can be really difficult.
A completely blank, it's the same with any kind of creative thing. A completely blank page or nothing is really hard because although you can do anything, you have no starting point, so knowing first is really hard. But once you've kind of got, you get that starting point, and then you normally start bouncing off the other players.
Yeah, I think RPGs are quite unique in that they give a really good grounding for that. In the same way, like some improv games and stuff like that, you start off with a situation, and the RPG style kind of keeps going all the way through.
Yeah, there's lots of prompt cues, random tables, all these sort of things as well. So there's that you never have a really, really blank page. If you want to avoid it, there's some sort of prompt every time. That's good.
Dimitiris, what's your answer?
Well, I'm pretty much. I've been fascinated by a certain thing that I found is happening to my life. I've been playing role-playing games for 20 years now, and I have memories now of not of of tables and out of character memories. I have in-character memories, especially when I get together with people I've played a long time. We have this memory of, do you remember that half-orc in that place, or do you remember that time where your character did that and that and that? And this is amazing because I seldom remember, things about, what sort of pizzas we had that day, or anything like this. But the memories from the sessions are really, really, from the games are really, really strong, and I kind of like that. It's like living lots of lives.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's an interesting thing that, like, I think it really does kind of give you some commonality with people, which leads in nicely to what I was going to say. I think the thing that I particularly love about RPGs is that it nothing really binds people together like creating something together. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So, like, if you've created a story, created a world, been part of something together, that gives you something that no one else has, and I think that's one of the real beauties of role-playing games. I mean, you get it with playing video games like multiplayer, but with tabletop stuff, you can do a lot more. You've got that shared input in a less regulated way.
Yeah, plus in video games you sort of react, while in role-playing games you do create. You put some piece of yourself into that.
Yeah, in a more definite way. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's also that something that I just thought of, that a lot of times I change my whole worldview from role playing some specific characters in my games as a player. So
yeah,
I think that lots of the times I see things differently if I play some form of character who's radically different from who I usually am. It's eye-opening.
Yeah, it can be really interesting to sort of explore a character from the inside almost, as opposed to kind of seeing them from the outside. Yeah, great. So our next question is, what do you look for in an RPG? I think this is probably a good one to take like 2 hits at. So, what do you kind of look for when your very first impression, and what sort of actually gets you to play it?
Okay, I'll start. There's something that I try to avoid when I see it. I leave the game is gimmicks. So lots of the times I see mechanics, or I see something advertised which is really superficial and it doesn't add to the experience, or it doesn't help in any way other than being a gimmick. So I avoid games like that. And should we do them together or in rounds?
Oh no, we'll go through. We'll go round.
Okay. And the other thing is, I really like. Crap. Some excitement, some inspiration to start world building, because most of the time I'm GM, so a really nice inspiration. If I find inspiration to say, hey, I could run a game in this, usually that's the one for me.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of interesting. So you need something there to sink your teeth into straight away, really.
Yeah, pretty much like inspiration. So I've seen a very underrated game which is called Red Tide, and it's part of one of these old school revival games that I know nothing about, really. I've played the Black Hack it was okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of all these sort of other OSR games. There's tons of friends of mine who are really into that, and I never really cared about them. And I saw Red Tide with its amazing setting in the sort of roughly Oriental, East Asian setting, and I was deeply inspired. And I said, I'd definitely run this game if I could.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things, isn't it? Like, if it gives you an image that kind of just sticks in your head sometimes, I think that can really help. For me, I'm kind of a big one for elevator pitches, and they do get gimmicky. I like a good gimmick, I think, personally. I think if the game then follows through with its cool gimmick, I want a game that does this, and if it doesn't deliver on that gimmick, then it's going to suck. But if I think it can deliver on the gimmick, then I'm really happy. I picked up Fellowship, which is probably my favorite Powered by the Apocalypse game, because it said and it can run Lord of the Rings, blah blah blah, but yeah, you know, a few different things, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stardust Crusaders, and I was like, no way. And just because of that one line, I went and bought the book, and now it's one of my favorites.
Well, I know you're fond of gimmicks. I met Purple in a convention where he was planning to run Shia LaBeouf as an actual cannibal. So yeah, I know your tastes.
Yeah, actual Cannibal Shia LaBeouf is a great game, and it pretty much says what it does on the tin. It's rather good though, and I will revisit Shia later actually. But anyway. Yeah, Chris, what attracts you to a game?
So the initial attraction would probably be seeing what it does that's new and different and unique. As much like you guys, I've been role playing for quite a while, so seeing and have a fairly decent number of systems that I can muck about with or that do the kind of things I want. So to get me interested, it normally has to be a fairly interesting hook, like Shinobigami had the PvP ninjas, or Golden Sky Stories has all of the cute and fluffy, well, not exactly conflict free, but no violence. So something that is a bit different. There's a lot of games out there that are you go out into the wilderness and you kill things. So it's, they can be great games, but I have quite a few games I really like that do that and that I'm generally happy to run. So variants on that theme, not generally hugely interested in.
So kind of what you're aiming for is sort of a suggested adventure almost.
Or sometimes it's just something that's new and different that I've not seen before. Like something like Everybody is John is a fairly basic game, but just for the whole, all of the PCs are different aspects of the same person. It's quite a interesting and different hook. You're not going to get like years and years of campaign play from it.
No.
But it's something I've not done before. So it's like, oh, what happens if we try this? And then you can kind of integrate similar-ish ideas into other things. Just kind of tweak and play with that a bit.
Oh, that's a difficult game to run properly. Well.
Yeah.
Without it descending into complete and utter farce and really being pretty horrible to people with mental illnesses, it can be very difficult to keep that game on track.
It generally, it is something where you very much need to have some tonal limits, but just kind of the basic, or like even something like Roll for Shoes, where you literally build your character up as you go through the game. I've done this. Oh, this is a thing I can do, which you can kind of emulate in Fate, I guess, by starting off with no aspect, having them in play for a bit more formalized way of saying.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, I think the difference there is that I'm like some of these we've been talking about are sort of gimmick sort of campaigns, play styles.
Yeah.
And some of them are gimmick mechanics. And I'm wondering if there's a difference there. The game goes, oh, we've got this. Can that really hold something? If someone goes, oh, I've got a novel mechanic, do people want to jump on that? I personally, I don't. I think that if you've got a novel mechanic, then it should be it needs to be in service of something where it really works. Otherwise, I'm not really that interested. I want to know about the experience, what I'm trying to get out of playing.
I think that mechanics in tabletop role-playing games need to be like UI design in applications. I have a design background, so quite sensitive to these things. Is like good design, especially in terms of mechanics, is transparent, is silent, it's barely there to notice. So it comes naturally, and that's how mechanics should be. It shouldn't feel like work. It should feel effortless in a way.
So you only notice it when it's wrong, basically.
Yeah.
As you know, the old adage about design goes.
It kind of depends on what grade of RPG it is as well, because, well, for something like Roll for Shoes or Everybody is John, the entire mechanics and experience is like half a page to a page. They are very gimmicky, but they're not really claiming to be anything more.
Yeah.
Whereas something like D&D 5th Ed, it's a lovely system that's very well built together, but it is an entire system rather than a single mechanic.
Yeah.
So you kind of get very different grades of experience. I guess it's kind of like the video games market, where it's all the way from the big budget AAAs that teams of hundreds have worked on, and they have a budget of millions, you get all stuff in there, to some dinky little thing that some guys wrapped out spare that you pay 50 pence for on Steam. If you're lucky, it'll last you 2 hours, but it had some really neat ideas and you really enjoyed those 2 hours.
I think the difference between the video games market and the RPG sort of space, I'm kind of loath to call it market because there's a lot of free stuff in there.
Yeah.
Is that the really big video games are still, a lot of them are trying to create an experience. See, I work in video games, and that's my background there. I feel that a lot of them are trying to do the same thing but bigger in a way. If you look at things like Assassin's Creed, they are not creating a toolbox for you to do your own thing in the same way that, say, the Cortex Prime stuff is.
No, I see your point. Well, there are games like this. There are like things like Minecraft, and these sort of games are insanely enabling people's creativity, I think.
But Minecraft was originally sort of in the indie space, not in the AAA space.
I see your point.
Some of that's also just technical limitations, obviously, of games. It can do what it's coded to, whereas RPGs, in theory, you can go completely off the rails and use like D&D 5th to do a high school rom-com.
If you're a horrendous masochist. I'm quite glad we don't have the same sort of quite as much of the generic system stuff.
Oh god, yeah.
I did mention Cortex Prime. I have backed that, but I really hope that they get that down, because the Cortex Plus books did a really good job of customizing the base system for different genres in a way that I've not seen anything else quite pull off.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of interested to see what they do there. The Buffy RPG ran with the same thing as the Smallville RPG, which ran the same as their like core superhero one, which ran the same as like more investigative stuff. So it was some very different feels, but all kind of important PCs, if that makes sense.
That is something that I do tend, a lot of the older generic systems especially.
Cough, GURPS, cough, yeah.
To a slightly lesser degree, Besem.
Besem had other problems.
It definitely did, yeah. But Besem at least went a little bit into, if you want to run this type of game, do this or do that. Where it had like different costs. If you're doing a different genre, it had different costs for different skills. So like a combat game, combat skills are priced differently to a rom-com, which I appreciated that it was a generic system, but they were pointing out that it's a generic system, but not everything will be the same in every use of it.
Was that third?
It was definitely in second as well.
I don't remember it from a second. Or was it just skills and not the actual crazy powers?
No, it was only skills.
Oh, right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because the crazy powers are what broke everything.
Oh god, yes. Container attributes. They
Yeah.
were stupid.
Just own a big mecha and make your mecha do it.
No, even better, just own a magical item which can transform into a mecha, so you don't even have the downside of having a mecha all the time.
Yeah. There was a couple of ways to do that and just multiply your character points, which was utterly horrendous.
Because basically every point you put into a container attribute actually gave you like 1.3 or 1.6.
Yeah,
so
it
you'd
was
end up with
pretty horrid.
Yeah, it was. You could work with. It's the same as any generic system. If the GM was willing to put the time.
I'm really surprised to hear that you both describe BESM as a generic system.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like, for me it's a genre system, like it's anime 100%. But you're
anime is not a genre.
That's the thing. That's the thing. That's what I was saying. Like, you're so deep into anime, so that BESM is generic to you. So that's different.
Yeah, anime is not a genre. I tell this to anyone who wants to make an anime game. Anime is not a genre. It's a style of genre. A way to interpret it. A lens through which to interpret a genre. And in the same way that GURPS interprets everything through those same stats, and therefore everything that you filter through it comes out, with certain things in common.
Fair.
Anime is kind of like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I say, BESM did give some pointers on if it's a romantic comedy game, here's the bit you want to focus on. If it's a mech game, here's the bit you want to focus on.
Yeah.
But that was more in the descriptive. There was some different skill costs, like I said, but most of the rest was descriptive fluff rather than anything mechanical. But similar with GURPS, you could use that to run a big rolling soap opera story where it's all about the relationships.
Yeah.
But my God, I would be that GM.
Oh man, that sounds like an exercise in pain.
Do they even have relationship mechanics?
I'm pretty sure it's in a source book somewhere.
Roll social. Oh God, there'll be everything. Yeah, GURPS EastEnders.
So the next one, since we've just talked about a load of games that have been around forever, what gives a game staying power? And how do we want to talk about staying power? Do we want to talk about we'll keep playing it a while, or we'll keep coming back to it, or just that it'll stay in the market? What do you guys think?
I think the will get back to it is the most important aspect of a game. Like how many different times of your life you're going to be attracted to that sort of game, I think.
Yeah. In that case, I'll address the particularly weird one for me, which is D&D. Because the primary reason I have played so much D&D, Pathfinder, etc., is because it's easier to find a group that way.
Yeah. If you ever just go on Meetup, because I haven't been away for work much this year, but in previous years, if I'm traveling to site, wherever, I will just go on Meetup and look for groups, and quite often there'll be a D&D group far and away more often than there's kind of a generic RPG. So yeah, it's very much the biggest player in the market. It's always easy to, slightly hard.
That's I don't know. Like the biggest factor for me to get back to a game is probably because I'm designated GM is how much space this game gives me to create stuff. So D&D is obviously fine. There's about 50, old school notebooks that I have with third edition campaigns and worlds and villages and all that stuff. But yeah, like, while I enjoy playing games with a very, very fixed meta plot as a player, I wouldn't go back to them. So like Masquerade or even Lord of the Rings, I wouldn't try it twice, I think.
Yeah. I know. I could see playing a Lord of the Rings game where you did sort of other things in the world. You weren't the focus characters. It could be fun, but again, it's one of those ones where you don't know what you want to go back to.
You don't want to dilute the magic almost. Like, you've been there, you've done that, it was really good. Is it going to be as good as we do it again?
Yeah, for me, the big one is Exalted, which does have some meta plot, but it's kind of a way doing its own thing. You don't really have it sets you in a scene, the meta plot does, but after the scene's been set, it's largely leaves you to your own devices. It's kind of nice.
It's kind of a big overarching, unless the GM throws anything better at you, bad stuff's coming down. But it's very easy to just make up your own stuff.
Yeah, and I think for me, the size and sort of the scale of the world for that game really is what keeps me coming back to it. There's so many bits of creation that I want to explore, so many cool stories I think would be interesting to tell. It just keeps bringing me back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely it for me. It's not really the mechanics. When I was playing, I enjoy the mechanics more because I have a lot of fun working out how to do cool things in that particular system.
So yeah, Exalted is an interesting game because it does have a lot of mechanical widgets to play with. So if you want to make someone that's good at violence, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Something a lot lighter.
Yeah, in third, it seems like a lot more of them are viable than just going full Invincible Sword Princess. So it's kind of nice. I've also feel that they've rebalanced some of the kind of not being specialized sort of stuff. So if you're not hugely specialized, you're not going to dominate, but you're not going to be absolutely trashed every time either, which is kind of nice. So I think there's a lot of scope for stories set in that world, and I think that's what draws me back to it again and again. I think it's the same with Unknown Armies. Like, I'll see something out the corner of my eye, like in the real world, and I'll be like, "Ooh, there's a game there." I think that's a similar thing, but because it's part of the real world, it just adds to its scope. What do you guys think?
Chris, that's a cue for you.
Yeah, like I say, there's so much in there that it's a really easy thing. Just there's all sorts of plot hooks and everything you can do with it. I suppose it's a bit interesting because most of the games I do tend to be they're less set in a specific setting almost. So it's kind of this is the game where you're doing X, Y, Z. Whereas with Exalted, you can run a game where you're pirates, whatever, or you can literally just go, give me your character concepts, make sure you have some reason why you're not all in different goddamn continents of the world, and let's go with that.
You are in X place.
Yes. And it's kind of, because like I say, most of the games I read and play these days tend to be a lot more generic with kind of a more fill in the blanks aspect. So it is kind of, although I'm still scheduled to be running Exalted second at some.
Run third. You should run third.
The book's like an inch thick.
What?
The book's huge.
It is huge, but it's not that much more huge than second.
Yeah, but I already know second.
Have you seen Hero System 6th edition?
Yes.
That's huge. Yeah.
It is.
That's the one that's literally bulletproof.
Don't try this at home, guys. Don't try this at home.
No. But yeah, somebody had a load of copies, so they tried shooting it, and I think it could resist up to like 0.22 caliber or something.
Jesus.
Nice.
That's oddly specific.
When your book can actually shake off bullets, then...
No, it's a nice system, Hero System. But like Exalted, I think when it coincided, discovering Exalted coincided with me watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I always have this sort of weird mix in my head that the only valid thing to play in Exalted is Avatar: The Last Airbender games. Just me.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next question, which is the most memorable NPC. So does anyone want to take it away?
I'll take it. So I've already answered this on Facebook. My most memorable one, I used to play in a LARP that I was the storyteller of. So that character is an NPC, the sheriff of Athens, Greece, a bold Nosferatu with odd teeth. I used to put these sort of pointy ears, thick, grim glasses, very raspy voice. I really love this character. He's so ancient and strong, but very. I was trying to avoid the whole very Central European vampires. Didn't like that whole claw of Dracula sort of thing for elder vampires. So I tried to make him a man of the people. It was nice.
Yeah, so what really drew you to that character then? You say that like taking those expectations and slightly subverting them, maybe? What made him particularly memorable?
To me, it was the fact that he was connected to so many things, and he was quite a big political influencer without being a suit. He had, real life wants and expectations, and that he didn't want to be a political player, but he had to in some ways. And I really enjoyed how much research I needed to do on ethnography and pop culture from the previous centuries. So like,
Oh wow,
yeah. So I started reading books about popular people in 1920s Athens, or famous merchants and things like that. Sort of. Athens has a lot of crazy people in the streets, and there are some books about them. So that was quite fascinating.
nice. In contrast, I think one of my most memorable NPCs didn't really do very much at all. See, they were only like a small child when the PCs came across them, and this was a game that ran for a year and ran like every week. We did 34 weeks. With some gaps. So it was a uni game. And this is another Exalted game. And a couple of sessions in, they go defeat this ghost that had been stealing children, and they get back, and they realize that nobody remembers this child. Like, everyone's forgotten them. So they do the sensible thing that any party would do and adopt the child. And we go through, and there's quite a lot of omens, things like that. The NPC, who is blazing with the power of the son of hell, and is obviously definitely a bad guy, tells one of the other PCs that the child is going to save the world, make everything right. And this PC believes them, tells everyone else, but doesn't tell them where they got that information. So for the next, like 15, 20 weeks, the rest of the party are looking after this kid who the party dragon-blooded has adopted. And because they are used to being an exile and used to being obeyed, they basically ended up in charge of the party because they're the only person that knows what they're doing in a position of power. So the child got adopted by the party, and the whole group are trying to raise this child while simultaneously trying to get like halfway across the frozen north to somewhere that they're not going to get hunted down.
That sounds like the best comic book that's just waiting to be written.
But the best bit was the ending, because I know the guy who was the father had worked this out, and I think one of the other PCs had worked it out, like one of the sidereals. It turns out, yes, the child was going to save the world, but from the perspective of the Yozis, the big evils, they were going to let them free and make everything right again with the universe. Because the whole reason that they've been forgotten is because their fate had been messed with. And that was because like the bunch of people that they found them with were actually there to sort of corrupt them before they became a Sidereal, change their destiny. And so this plotline has been building for about a year. And the ending is like this child getting exalted, and they get taken up to heaven, and they walk into the loom of fate, at which point they pull out their scythe and get to work. And the whole thing comes tumbling down. And it was like just a really good ending because everyone kind of knew it, that they'd effectively adopted the Antichrist. But they kind of went, our characters like care about this kid. We're not like, we don't care. We're just going to keep protecting them and raising them anyway. And that was really cool because the NPC drove the entire campaign.
Nice.
Cool.
Chris?
So I think my most memorable NPC was it was a Mistborn game, which, so for anyone that hasn't played it, is kind of fairly low-tech, steampunkish rebellion type of thing, where very distinct social classes and so forth, where the very first heist they did involved sneaking into a mansion, nicking whatever they could just for personal profit, but trying to get one of two different nobles into the basement at a certain time, when, lo and surprise, the basement went up in flames, whoever was in the basement died. And the daughter of that noble family then inherited it and kind of stayed in touch with them for a while, gave them later jobs, and basically ended up in a kind of love triangle-ish sort of thing with one of the PCs. All of the other PCs were kept going, she's clearly playing with you. What the hell are you doing? Can you please stop seeing her? And it basically culminated with the PC proposing marriage to her, at which point I actually had to take a time out because I was honestly not sure how the hell to react. Dobbing the rest of the PCs into the Inquisition to be hunted down and murdered, while the PCs were busy whipping up all of the rest of the commoners into a massive mob to march on the noble's estate and basically burn everything. So the game ended with the PC and his now fiancée in the nobility's castle, a massive peasant mob led by the rest of the PCs, complete with full-on torches and pitchforks, leading the way up there. It was just such a memorable ending. It was that entire moment of, oh, you're proposing to her. I have no idea how she would react. You're going to have to give me a moment. Because, yeah, I've never actually... It wasn't intended to be PvP at all. It just ended up going that way purely because of this one NPC.
Oh, man, I've had a game that I played in where there was an Inquisitor called Sister Scarlata. And this was a Fading Suns game. And we were deathly afraid of her. Except the captain of our ship, who was mostly captain because he was the noble. And he kind of transmuted that absolute terror into kind of some bizarre crush. It was really weird how it developed over the course of the game. But in the end, it's like, yeah, we're going to have to pretend we don't know her so we can get out of this situation. Which points out someone that decided to point out that we painted her name on the side of the ship. Because that's what we named the ship. I was like, yeah, that's that plan out the window. Great.
You'll always remember this name, though, right? How long has it been?
Oh, that's got to be about 10 years, 12 years.
That's memories. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh, so we got another one that's kind of related, but might be a bit shorter because I don't really have much on this. Favorite recurring NPC. Now, I'm not a big fan of these, really. I've got like a couple that kind of happen, but not really much. And recently, I've been doing these, like one-shots and things for cons that I might repeat. So I'm not sure if I can count those.
that's not recurring. It should be like a motif in a campaign or something.
Yeah, for my exalted ones, I almost always have some crazy sidereals with a boat.
Crazy sidereals with a bow.
Yeah, they just turn up in the middle of like wherever, and there's two of them. There's an old one and a young one, and they've got a boat.
Regardless of wherever it is, they just have a boat.
Oh yeah. There was one time they were the PCs befriended them, and they were the PCs backup. At which point they just they needed to get there very quickly, so they stole a load of explosives and blew a hole in heaven, and just rode the boat down. They're so the idea is that the old one is a complete and utter troublemaker, but he's just too good to get rid of. He's gone deep off the sort of martial arts side, so he's like, and he's the head of the Commission for Forbidden Gods. The Commission for the Forbidden Gods consists of him and his apprentice, because no one else wants to join, because there are no forbidden gods. Definitely not.
Okay, it's fun.
But that they've turned up in a couple of games that I've run of Exalted, but apart from that, I don't really do them. I mean, I possibly do, but don't really realize that I'm doing it sometimes.
I think there's definitely kind of stock personality types. It's fair. As a GM, there definitely tends to be, okay, I need quite a lot of my brusque business will probably be fairly similar, because screening for a little so they blur together a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't quite.
Yeah, they're not quite the same as the same character coming back. I think that's kind of because I tend to reset the world each time as well. Like each campaign that I run they don't really follow on from each other. Whereas I think if they did, then that'd be different. Dimitiris?
I have a favorite and I have a non-favorite. So the guy that I absolutely hate as a recurring NPC is Elminster. I've played lots of D&D with GMs that really wanted to introduce Elminster in some way in the plot, and really I liked the character, but now it's been done too much for my taste. So when I hear Chosen of Mystra, I go away. My favorite one was when I was GMing a vampire game as a prequel for the LARP I was running in Athens. We had this friend of the host, of the guy that one of the players who's putting the plates and the food and the things like that, and he had a friend who really wanted to come and watch us play. He couldn't be regular enough to make his own character or do anything like this, so he would just show up. And because I really thought I needed to to give him something to do, I had him be the taxi driver in every taxi they got. So every now and then, every 3 weeks, they would bump into the same taxi driver. And the thing is, he was smart enough to make jokes about them being vampires and all, but at the same time not deep enough so that they would think he knew.
Oh, brilliant.
And yeah, it just every now and then I would have him come to the game, so I'm like, okay, there's time for the taxi driver again. That's my absolute favorite one.
That's great fun. Cool. Chris?
So I tend to run a fair number of different games rather than having that much opportunity for kind of long-running, recurring. My favorite ones would probably be from an Exalted game where there were the Stakes of Purgatory, who were basically technically gods of murder and judgment, but they were basically slightly dippy teenage fangirls of murder who couldn't quite understand how to resolve situations without killing people, which led to a lot of fun shenanigans with the PCs of these people say they're gods and our allies, and oh my god, can we please get them to stop killing people? And then one of them proposed marriage to one of the PCs, and everything kind of went crazy.
Was this like sort of be careful what you wish for thing? You can get them involved, but are you sure you really want to?
Pretty much. They initially found one of them in stake form that was flying around and murdering some of their sailors. She dipped into the river, so one of them dove in to save her, and she interpreted this as, oh my god, he's so brave diving in to save me. And then they didn't even find out the stakes were actually people until about 2 months later in game time.
Stakes?
And then because they could transform into basically like foot-long flying metal stakes to kill people better.
What's this in?
Exalted.
What were they? Why were they doing this?
They were basically gods of punishment and murder.
Okay.
But they were mostly into that person did something against that we don't think is good, so let's kill them. And they weren't really good on anything other than that.
It was the transforming into stakes bit that just seemed really random.
Sorry, yeah. That was kind of plagiarized from a Mineko. If you've ever read or seen that. It's a really good murder mystery.
Yeah, is it just one of the wild theories that gets brought up, people turn into stakes?
More or less, yes. But yeah, it was just fun having this group of basically slightly dippy teenage fangirls that the PCs had to spend most of their time trying to convince to not murder. It's always fun.
That is pretty beautiful. So they've turned up in a few things then?
That, or just because they were some of the most fun to actually NPC as, rather than they've been particularly... They showed up strongly within that 12-week session of Exalted, but they were just some of the most fun to play.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right. The next question, we're on to the hows. So this would be week 2, but we're going to try get through as much of this as possible. We're trying to get to today, well, broadcasting date. So we're going to go for number 6. How can players make a world seem real? How can players make a world seem real?
This is the type of thing I always like to try and get the players actually involved at some point prior to the game. So rather than just me info dumping a load of things, get them to make things up so they can actually in character go, oh yes, of course I know of the Red Lake Tavern or whatever, because they've made bits of the world up in advance or have some investment.
Yeah.
Just so, or allow them to do that on the fly. Because if people are having to shuffle through their notes and go, oh yes, I know there's something here, give me a minute, it kind of breaks it a bit.
Yeah, I tend to go very much more for the sort of on the fly stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like I tend not to pre-build things, but definitely getting them and their characters deeply woven into it is, I think, really important. That's one of the great things, because as a GM, it's really hard to like add verisimilitude to everything. Whereas if the players can start sprinkling in, nice bits of information, nice descriptions, that kind of thing, then that can be really good. There's only so much painting of word pictures I can do.
I think that in my experience, the biggest thing is understanding that there's some trust to be built. So most of the time, and I feel I might be totally different to you guys, i.e. most of the time I play with people I know rather than in conventions or spontaneously or, in meetups and things like this. And I think this helps me have some time and set expectations with other people. And then they know that I'm pitching them hooks, basically. So taking a few steps back, they take the bait, they take the hook, and then they just start feeling the niche that exists in the game for them. I think that's the best way. Do I make sense? I felt I'm rambling.
So, like, once you've worked out what you're supposed to be doing, just you can go with the flow a bit more. Is that what you're trying to go with?
Well, it's the thing that I always leave some space for the players to fill themselves, and I'm very clear when I say, "Hey, how about you're connected to that part? So how about you come from this kingdom? Let's say in a fantasy game, the player has to understand." At that point that this is a pitch, this is a hook for him to be connected, and just expand upon it and create his own stuff, and I will probably be all right with him. So that's the what I'm describing pretty much.
Yeah, I think the cool one is to give a nice example, Lasers and Feelings, which is obviously I do for one shots, but even in that, the sheer amount of asking people and then getting answers, because it's kind of encouraged by the game, they have permission to make stuff up. I mean, it works well in a one shot, but it does really work in campaigns as well. If you say something, it might sound a bit silly to you, but because you know the thinking behind it, you know that there's a really good deep reason. But if you turn around and confidently answer, well, yeah, of course the flags are red. And they've got this like griffin motif on them. Everyone's going to turn around and go, "Ooh, that's really interesting," because they don't know that you just made it up, or if they do, they can suspend disbelief.
It's things like that. Why I try to avoid having crazy or having too much detail written down to begin with, because you end up having to continue to look at your notes and try and remember all the little bits. And some of it the players will not be interested. Whereas if you throw some bits out there, you can obviously make notes as you're doing it, but then give them more on the bits they're interested in. So if they're interested in, there's a griffin, do that mean they have actual griffins, or is it a heraldic thing or historical? Then you can hook that in. Whereas if you just, here's a paragraph of explanatory text, I'm not great at the dramatic reading thing, so their eyes probably going to glaze over as a dump.
Yeah. So, how do you guys feel about backstories? Because that's an interesting thing. Like, how do you feel about character backstory? How much is too much? See, I'm a sort of I like a sort of one sentence sort of like pitch of what the character is, and maybe like a paragraph of backstory. And I think much more than that is generally actually a bit too much, especially if you're not making characters together. What do you guys feel?
But I would very strongly adjust these numbers to the actual length of a campaign, for one. So the more invested everyone is going to be in this game, the more backstory I would do. I do secret backstory most of the times I'm a player. So even if the GM gives me a sentence or a paragraph, I would probably do 3 pages or things like this. I go full method actor in that sort of thing. But that's just me. I'm really, really big into that.
Yeah, you see, I'm completely the way. I find that like if I have too much down, then it really stops me getting into the character, because I'm constantly trying to work out how to reincorporate stuff. Whereas if stuff just flows, I can then reincorporate it again later, and it comes out well.
I'm kind of with Purple. I prefer having bullet points of what you think will actually be relevant or kind of applicable. If you want to have more, that's fine, but kind of the full kit and caboodle of everything you did in your youth. As a GM, I would rather you just tell me what you're wanting to do, any particularly major contacts or allies or whatever you have in your past. If you want to throw more at me, I don't mind, but I may or may not fully integrate or use it.
So as a GM, you'd rather have like a digest, even if they've got a big long story. You need the digest version, please, bullet points kind of thing.
Well, also it means that I'm focusing on the bits the players want, as opposed to oh, you said you had a great uncle. Clearly, this is deeply important to your backstory. Well, it could just be you threw in a great uncle.
Yeah.
A good idea at the time.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of those difference in playstyles thing. Like, I personally aren't a big one for lots of backstory, but like I have like nothing against people that do, you know? It's just how you want to play the game, really, isn't it?
It depends on the game as well. Like, I'm not a player in very superficial games, so I haven't played D&D for about 5 years or something like that, or perhaps 10, I don't know. So most of the games I play are either horror or things like this, where in my research I find things about my character that are important to them, in a way that you find that your upbringing was important, or you really connected to a place, the neighborhood you grew up, or something like this. So I do the research, and doing the research and the writing, I find where I gravitate and say, oh, my character had a long lost love for some reason. I cannot find this if I just have a paragraph backstory.
Yeah.
That's my process, I would say, as a character.
So you're kind of like workshopping out the character as you're doing so. Is that kind of where we're going with
this? Yeah. So I don't need to hand in my research to the game master, and I could probably distill it to a single sentence afterwards. But I need to put the work first. But that's just me.
Yeah, the process is important there.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. I say I'm kind of the other way, but I think that's partly the games that I tend to end up playing, which tend to be very short anyway. I don't get enough chance to actually play campaigns. I would love to be doing a long-running horror campaign. I've not had a chance in many years. Mostly because I'm a forever GM, and all my horror stuff tends to be very short. Surprise. But yeah, like I think that's partly like game style, and just partly like how I approach a lot of gaming in general. I know it's a really interesting thing. It's a really interesting difference there.
Yeah, most of the roleplay games I do are either going to be 4 or 12 weeks. So again, kind of spending lots of time on in-depth backstory. If it's a game that can actually explore it in that time, might be okay. But for a lot of games, you're not going to have to get kind of fully involved and engaged. Great.
Kind of get it, yeah. I think 12s for me is pushing it. Like it's not. I think you're on long game there, kind of. You're not on forever game, but you're on kind of long game territory. With the sort of plots you can explore, you've got time to do a couple of bits on each character. Not like a full arc, but getting there.
It depends obviously on what level of backstory you've got. Like if you've kind of got a page of fairly decent sized text, you probably managed to at least bring up most of the points in that. But if you're kind of going into, I have an entire family and stuff, it's the more you've got in there, obviously, the more that may just never come up. Whereas with a game of longer length, like a game that's been running, you can probably get through. Oh yeah, like entire soap opera type. This is
awesome. So yeah, that is the first 6 questions. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back with the rest. Hopefully the next 6. Catch you in a bit.